Hey, good morning, everybody. Today's word for the day is the Italian word for good morning is buongiorno. Buongiorno. So buongiorno, everybody. Hope you're doing good. Hey, today we're gonna got a lot to cover, and we got a lot of verses to look at. So I'm gonna try to push through it rather quickly. Last week, one of the verses that stuck out to me was after Jesus was talking about the destruction of Jerusalem, and he was telling the believers about those that would. He was warning them, and he gave them this verse. He said, "Stand firm, and you will win life." I just like that phrase. Stand firm, and you will win life, no matter what's happening to you in life. But if you stand firm, so good verse. All right, we're in Psalm. This is day number 12, April 10th. We're on Psalms 31 through 33, and then Luke 23 through 24. Psalms 31. David wrote a prayer of deliverance when he was confronted with a conspiracy so powerful that it drove all of his friends away. He's left by himself, and you can see that in the when he's writing. He's just lonely. He's frustrated because everyone's abandoned him. Now, there's an interesting verse in that passage. It's Psalms 31:5. See if it sounds familiar to you. Into your hands I commit my spirit, David wrote. It's the same phrase that Jesus used right before he dies in Luke 23:46. In fact, that's one of the chapters that we're reading for today, and you'll see Jesus use that very phrase. He identified with that chapter, and in that chapter he states this confidence reliance on God, even though everything else around him is falling apart. And that's exactly what's happening to Jesus as well. So really neat to make those connections. So read those back and forth and really get a kind of a taste of what Jesus was thinking about in his mind. Okay, Psalms 32. It's a great psalm of forgiveness. Boy, if you've done something wrong and you're really dealing with shame, read that psalm, Psalm 32. It describes kind of the agony of somebody of what you're going through when you have that guilt on your shoulders and the physicality of it, how it just makes you sick. But when you ask for forgiveness and how that's just unloaded off, and you find joy again. And he talks about God's faithful love. And then Psalms 33 is a great psalm for praise. So if you just want to wake up in the morning and get your juices flowing for the Lord, read that psalm. It's a great psalm to use in the worship service too. All right, let's go to the New Testament, Luke 23. This is one of those sad chapters where we see the trial, crucifixion, death, and resurrection of Jesus. And great timing as far as the Holy Week that we were part of this week and Easter on Sunday. So it's a great reflection. So I'm just going to highlight a couple of things that you might not know about instead of talking about some of the obvious things that you might know about. So Pontius Pilate was overseeing, he was the governor of Judea at that time, and he was overseeing the trial of Jesus. In fact, there was an artifact found in 1961 that proved that he was a real person. So I thought that was kind of neat. Herod Antipas was the tetrarch. A tetrarch, so there was a governor, and then a tetrarch was a person that watched over a quarter of that area. So it'd be like a governor. This would be maybe like maybe we'll say a president of an area, and then the tetrarch was kind of like the governor, like we have in our states. But they divided them into four. Some of these areas. I don't know if that's a great. It's just that one step lower in the political pyramid. And so both of them went through the trial. Pontius came out of it and says Jesus is innocent. I can't punish him. I don't see any reason for it. But it's a spiritual issue. It's not something against the state. Now he was normally Romans would put to death anybody that would claim to be a king. Jesus never claimed it himself. But seems like Pontius Pilate knew exactly that Jesus was talking about a spiritual kingdom and not a physical kingdom, so Rome wasn't involved with it. But the people kept pushing back and crying out for Jesus' head. And in fact, 3 times he says, "Are you sure this guy is innocent?" And they said, "No, we don't want him. Bring us Barabbas." And Barabbas was a criminal. He was a wicked guy that caused an uprising, and he was responsible for murder. And they wanted to free him versus Jesus, a guy that healed people, was nice to people, all because they were afraid of their power that was going to be undermined, and how he confronted their spiritual inefficiencies. It's really sad to see what happens when people get filled with hate, and just because they disagree with someone so hard. All right. So Pilate gives in the political pressure, and he turns Jesus over to be crucified. It's kind of interesting. Usually they made the person that was condemned to die to carry his cross, but this story says that they pulled out Simon from Cyrene, which is in Libya, to help carry his cross. Jesus was whipped prior to that, and so he was probably in such tough shape that he couldn't carry his own cross. And so they brought him, it says, to the place of Calvary, or the place of the skull. The word skull in Latin means Calaverius, And that's where we get the word Calvary from. Now there's two other criminals that put right beside him. One of the criminals made fun of Jesus, says, "Come on, you're the Messiah. Why don't you save yourself, and then while you're at it, why don't you save us?" And the other one says, "Be quiet." He says, "We're the ones that are guilty. This guy isn't guilty." He recognized who Jesus was. And he says, "Jesus, will you remember me when you go to your kingdom?" And Jesus says, "Absolutely. In fact, today you're going to be with me in paradise." It's a really cool story. The first person that to go to heaven with Jesus was a criminal on a cross. It says at noon then darkness came over the land, and then said that the big veil of the temple was ripped. There used to be a veil in the Holy of Holies in the temple. No one could go into that place. It was a place where God was assumed to dwell. And only one time a year would the high priest go in and do his services and then come back out. But only one person could do that once a year. And that veil was ripped. Some say that it symbolizes that now we all have access to God because of what Jesus did on the cross. Some say that it's God leaving the temple and he never was going to return. Because now he's going to come and dwell within us when we have a relationship with God through Jesus Christ. So very interesting there. It's interesting that Joseph takes his body. Joseph was part of the Sanhedrin that condemned him. We don't know if he was there or he voted no. But he cared about Jesus and he wanted his body to take care of him. Him and some women came and anointed the body with a bunch of different aloes and myrrh. Typically, they put a lot of that stuff on to help preserve the body and to keep the decomposure down, decomposing down. They say that they used 75 pounds that first day just to anoint his body. So they put him in a grave and they put a stone around that. We know that story. Well, some women went in the morning to check on him and to bring some more aloes, and here the stone is rolled away, and they walk, and Jesus' body is not there, and two people shining in bright lights came and said, "No, he's alive." That's really interesting because it's women. Now, when you want to have a conspiracy of a resurrection, you wouldn't have sent women at that time period. Their testimonies weren't allowed in a court of law. They were considered unreliable. So if you're going to cover up a big lie and take Jesus' body, you don't send women to tell people to be the main to give the main testimony of that. So maybe that it's true, and maybe they were the ones that actually saw that, and so they included that in that story. And so that's kind of an interesting point to remember. Then it says Jesus, there's a encounter on the Damascus Road where he meets two people and he reveals himself, and they go back and tell Jesus, or tell his disciples that they saw Jesus alive. And then the last scene is Jesus with them in the upper room, and he comes in and everybody's excited. They're kind of in disbelief, but they're excited that Jesus is alive. But one of the things that was interesting is that he asked for something to eat. And so then they gave him some fish and he ate it, which tells us that he wasn't a ghost and that he wasn't a spirit, that his body had been transformed. It was physical, yet spiritual, yet heavenly at the same time. It gives us a glimpse of what our bodies are going to be like in heaven. All right, that's as much as I can go today. I've gone long. I hope you have a good... This is a couple hard chapters to read in Luke because it's Jesus' death, but unbelievable Savior that we have that would go through that in order that we might have life. So I hope that you learned something from your reading today. Blessings, everyone.